The Galactic Council station hung in the void like a second star, its lights shimmering across the endless dark. From a distance, the colossal ring-shaped station looked serene, almost beautiful. Up close, inside its council chamber, it was anything but peaceful. Hundreds of species filled the great hall, each in their allotted place. Delegates with insect wings that buzzed softly, tree-like beings who rustled when they spoke, creatures of light encased in translator spheres, all eyes turned toward the human section. Only one figure sat there, Jake Martinez. Jake's black suit looked plain compared to the radiant silks and gilded armor of the alien delegations. He felt the weight of their stares. The first human ever invited to the Galactic Council. He wasn't here for Earth alone. He represented every human colony struggling to find its place among the stars. The session began with the booming voice of the council speaker, a tall alien with purple skin and 3 golden eyes. Today, we discuss the question of humans, a new species admitted as candidates for observation. Their place in the order of the galaxy must be determined. Jake's jaw tightened. He knew this wasn't going to be a welcoming ceremony. Commander Velter of the Zephyrian Empire stood. 8 feet tall, with gray skin stretched tight over muscle and a chest glittering with metals, Velter radiated arrogance. "I have observed these humans," his deep voice thundered. "They are nothing. They bicker among themselves, fight primitive wars, and barely scrape at the edges of space travel. If they entered our sector, my fleet would conquer them in less than a month." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. A delegation of Corinth, beings that looked like living trees, rustled their leaves in approval. The machine-like nexus emitted a chorus of beeps that translated into the same sentiment, agreement with Velter. Jake sat silently. He wanted to stand, to shout, to defend his people. But the council rules were strict. Humans weren't permitted to speak yet. Then, from the far end of the hall, a figure rose with the slow certainty of age. Elder Zix Moth of the Vorak Collective. His people were as old as the stars themselves, known to observe without interfering. When Zix Moth spoke, the galaxy listened. His shell glowed softly with ancient glyphs, his black eyes reflecting every soul in the chamber. His voice was quiet, but every ear strained to hear. "In my 10,000 years, I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched proud conquerors turn to ash. I have studied these humans. What I found disturbs me." The hall stilled. Even Velter shifted uncomfortably. Zix Moth turned, his gaze falling on Jake. "Most beings, when cornered, surrender. When they face death, they seek to preserve what life they can. This is wisdom. This is survival. But humans," he paused and his shell pulsed brighter. "Humans are different. When they are bleeding, when they are broken, when they are certain to die, they do not surrender. They become more dangerous." Velter barked a harsh laugh. "That is not strength, that is madness." "Madness?" Zix Moth tilted his head. 3,000 years ago, the hegemony believed the same of the Kethmor. They thought the small, weak people would break under conquest. Instead, the war lasted 15 years. Entire cities reduced to rubble. Civilians who fought with sticks when their armies had fallen. The hegemony collapsed. The Kethmor endured, and no one has dared test them again. The hall was silent now, every species listening, captivated. Zix Moth's black eyes fixed on the Zephyrian commander. "I see the same trait in humans. If you strike them, they will bleed, but they will not yield. They will burn their own world before they bow." The old Vorak's gaze swept across the chamber. "I give this council one warning. Do not mistake human weakness for defeat. They are most dangerous when cornered." Then he sat. The silence lingered, heavy as stone. Velter broke it, his voice cold but less certain. "The Zephyrian Empire does not fear primitives. If the council wishes, we shall test this theory. We will measure human strength directly." Jake's stomach dropped. He finally stood, breaking protocol. His voice carried desperate clarity. "My people do not seek war. We came here for peace, for friendship and trade, not conquest." Velter turned his cold, gray eyes on him and sneered. "Sometimes, human, war chooses you." The vote was called. One by one, alien delegations sided with the Zephyrians. The test would happen. Jake sank into his chair, helpless. Only Zix Moth's black, ageless eyes found his, filled with quiet sorrow. "Tell your people to prepare," the elder whispered when the chamber adjourned. "Their greatest trial is coming." The red sun of the New Denver system burned low against the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across forests and rivers that could have been mistaken for Earth itself. To the colonists who lived there, Miners, farmers, builders. It had become home. Governor Pete Sullivan stood on the balcony of his office in Riverside, the colony's capital. A broad man with gray in his hair and scars on his hands from years as a Marine, he had come here 5 years ago to help shape a peaceful frontier. The city spread below him, streets bustling with markets, children laughing, miners walking back from the mountains, the air filled with the smell of pine. A world of quiet promise. But Pete's eyes were fixed on the sky. He knew what was coming. 3 days earlier, a coded message had reached him from Ambassador Jake Martinez. Prepare. The Zephyrians are coming. Behind him, Captain Amy Chin, his aide and military advisor, burst into the room, breathless. Governor Admiral Crawford reports multiple hyperspace signatures, 50 ships at least. Pete's jaw tightened. He didn't need binoculars to know what kind of ships those were. He had read the reports of the Zephyrian fleet, dreadnoughts the size of cities, flanked by destroyers and cruisers. He turned back to Amy. Sound the alarms. Get every able-bodied civilian to shelter. Call the militia. This is it. High above New Denver in orbit, Admiral Lisa Crawford stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiance. It was an old Earth cruiser, patched and reinforced, but it was all they had. Around her floated 6 escorts and a handful of atmospheric fighters, barely more than a skirmish force. The Zephyrian fleet arrived in formation, like a wall of iron sliding into reality. 5 massive dreadnoughts led the line, their hulls gleaming silver under the sun. Behind them came cruisers and destroyers in disciplined rows. "God," whispered Lieutenant Bob Turner, Crawford's navigation officer. "Look at them. That's an entire war armada." Crawford's face was carved from steel. "Send to all ships battle stations. This is not a drill." Her people moved fast, but she could feel the fear thick in the air. These weren't veteran fleets. They were miners turned pilots, colonists handed rifles, engineers taught to man gunnery stations. But they had one advantage. They had nowhere to run. On the Zephyrian flagship, Commander Velter stood tall on his command deck. His 3 eyes glowed with cold satisfaction as he looked down on the green and blue world. "This will be simple," he told his officers. "One quick strike to remind the Council of Zephyrian superiority. These humans will surrender before the day is out." He raised a hand. "Open a channel." A moment later, his face filled every broadcast screen on New Denver. Homes, shops, military bases, even the governor's office. "Humans of New Denver," he declared, his voice booming. "I am Commander Velter of the Zephyrian Third Fleet. You are surrounded and hopelessly outnumbered. Your primitive defenses cannot stand against us. Surrender now, and you will be treated as servants of the Empire. Resist, and you will be annihilated." The transmission ended. Silence followed. Then Governor Sullivan appeared on the same screens, standing before a microphone, his voice calm but firm. 3 weeks ago, the Galactic Council allowed the Zephyrians to test our strength. They think we are weak. They think we will give up without a fight. They are wrong. This is our home. If they want it, they'll have to take it from us. On the flagship, Velter barked a laugh. "Fools!" He turned to his weapons officer. "Begin orbital bombardment. Target their military bases. Show them real power." The first plasma beam struck from orbit, green fire lancing through the sky. The blast flattened the Riverside military base in seconds, turning buildings into molten glass and shaking the earth for miles. Admiral Crawford gritted her teeth on the Defiance's bridge, watching the devastation on her screens. She had friends in that base. Her rage boiled hotter than fear. "All ships," she said, her voice like iron. "This is Crawford. We cannot match their firepower, but we can bleed them. Delta 7 attack pattern, target their lead ships." The ragged human fleet surged forward. Compared to the Zephyrian formation, they were gnats attacking titans. Missiles streaked from the Defiance and its escorts, bright trails cutting through the void. The Zephyrians answered with a wall of plasma fire. A human escort, the Liberty, took 3 beams head-on and exploded, scattering debris across space. Still, the humans did not falter. Captain Roy Henderson led his squadron of 12 fighters straight into the enemy line. His voice came steady over the comms. "Phoenix Squadron, this is it. If we don't make it back, tell our families we died fighting for freedom." The fighters dove like hawks, weaving between Zephyrian guns, firing everything they had. Plasma cannons filled the sky with deadly green, but the humans pressed on. 3 fighters went down in the first pass. Henderson's craft shuddered, its engines trailing smoke. He knew he wouldn't make it back. Instead of retreating, he angled his ship toward the enemy flagship's bridge. "Phoenix leader to all ships," he said. "Tell them we held the line." His fighter slammed into the Zephyrian bridge in a blinding explosion. On the flagship, alarms screamed. Velter staggered as his command deck shuddered violently. The bridge was destroyed, dozens of his best officers gone in an instant. His prideful smirk vanished. "This was supposed to be easy," he muttered, staring out at the chaos. But the humans weren't done yet. On the surface of New Denver, people watched the sky burning with fire. Explosions echoed even from orbit. But in the streets of Riverside, Millerville, and New Spring Valley, factory workers and farmers were already arming themselves with hunting rifles, mining explosives, and whatever they could find. Colonel Bate Morgan, commander of the Colonial Guard, raised her field radio. Her voice was calm, steady, the kind of tone that made people follow. "This is Colonel Morgan to all units. The Zephyrians have landed in Riverside, Millerville, and New Spring Valley. Hit them hard and fall back. Make them pay for every street." The first Zephyrian troop transports screamed through the atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls glowing from re-entry. They landed on the outskirts of Riverside, disgorging columns of gray-skinned warriors in red armor. The soldiers moved with ruthless precision, their plasma rifles gleaming under the sun. To them, this was routine, another easy conquest. But the streets of Riverside were not empty. Tony Reeves crouched behind an overturned truck, gripping the wooden stock of his father's old hunting rifle so hard his knuckles turned white. Beside him, Amy Phillips, a nurse-turned-battlefield medic, tightened a bandage around a boy's arm. She glanced at Tony. "You ever killed anyone before?" she asked. Tony shook his head. "No, but I'm not letting them burn my home." Down the street, 3 Zephyrian soldiers advanced, their heavy footsteps echoing against shattered concrete. Tony steadied his rifle, breath shallow. He fired. The bullet slammed into a soldier's chest, making him stumble. The armor held, but the alien hissed in pain. "Keep shooting," Amy shouted. Windows shattered as more humans opened fire from apartments and rooftops. Factory workers, shopkeepers, miners, anyone who could hold a weapon joined the fight. The Zephyrians expected cowering civilians. Instead, they were ambushed from every corner. One alien fell, then another. The third tried to retreat, only to be dragged into an alley where 2 dockworkers with knives finished him off. The streets of Riverside erupted in chaos. Colonel Bate Morgan knelt over a map spread across a cracked table in the government building. Her Colonial Guard, just 3,000 strong at the start, was already bleeding, but her eyes burned with determination. "Every civilian who can fight is joining us," she told her officers. "That's our strength. They know these streets, the Zephyrians don't." She keyed her radio. "All units, this is Morgan. The aliens have armor, shields, and numbers. We have grit. Hit them fast, then vanish. Strike again from another angle, make them chase ghosts." In the tunnels beneath Riverside, Sergeant Danny Clark led a squad of Colonial Marines through dripping maintenance corridors. His men carried scavenged explosives and battered rifles. "They've set up supply lines near the industrial sector," Clark said, his voice low. "We cut those, they're advanced slows, simple as that." Private Steve Turner, once a car mechanic, grinned despite the fear in his eyes. "Sir, these tunnels connect to half the city. We can hit them anywhere." Clark nodded. "Exactly, they don't know this ground, we do." Minutes later, a Zephyrian supply convoy rolled down a street above. Suddenly, the road erupted as homemade charges detonated beneath it. Alien vehicles flipped like toys. Marines burst from the sewers, guns blazing, then vanished underground before reinforcements arrived. The Zephyrians were left staring at burning wreckage, bewildered. For Commander Velter, the day that was meant to end in triumph had become a nightmare. From the command deck of a reserve cruiser, he watched casualty reports flood in. "Resistance is stronger than expected," his tactical officer said nervously. "Civilians are fighting alongside soldiers." Velter's eyes narrowed. "Civilians with hunting rifles." "Yes, Commander, they're everywhere, every street, every building. It is costly to advance." Velter slammed a fist into the arm of his chair. "They should be begging for mercy, not fighting. This is madness." But in his chest, where pride once burned, he felt a strange chill. Back in Riverside, the battle raged into night. Fires lit the sky, smoke turned the stars red. Sergeant Danny Clark and his squad returned to the surface, slipping into alleys lined with rubble. "Targets ahead," Turner whispered. A squad of Zephyrian soldiers marched down the avenue, their black visors glowing faintly. Clark raised his hand. At once the humans opened fire from rooftops, windows, and storm drains. The aliens scrambled, returning fire, their plasma bolts lighting the street. But the humans didn't stay in one place. They moved, vanished, struck again. It wasn't just soldiers fighting now. Civilians with bottles of fuel turned cars into firebombs. Farmers used mining explosives to collapse buildings onto enemy patrols. Children ran through alleys, carrying ammunition to the front. The Zephyrians had numbers, the humans had the city itself. Governor Pete Sullivan stood in the command center, the ground trembling with every distant explosion. Reports poured in, Riverside holding, Millerville burning, New Spring Valley under siege. His aide, Captain Chin, had been wounded earlier, her arm bandaged but her voice still strong as she relayed orders. "Sir, the aliens hold about a third of Riverside, but our people are making them fight for every block." Sullivan's eyes hardened. "Good, let them bleed for every inch." By dawn, the streets were lined with rubble and corpses. Zephyrian bodies lay alongside human dead, a grim testament to the night's fury. Amy Phillips knelt in the ruins of a cafe, her hands red as she patched up a wounded boy no older than 16. Around her, civilians carried the injured into makeshift hospitals set up in schools and churches. Tony Reeves sat against a wall, reloading his rifle with trembling hands. His body ached, but his eyes burned with defiance. "They thought we'd surrender," he muttered. Amy looked up at him, her face smeared with soot. "Then they've never met humans." On the orbiting cruiser, Velter stared at the tactical map. His troops had landed, but the city was not falling. Instead, every block became a battlefield. Every civilian was a fighter. His aide hesitated before speaking. "Commander, perhaps Elder Zixmoth's warning was true, the humans." "Enough," Velter snapped, but his voice lacked its former certainty. He turned back to the burning world below. What kind of species fought harder when the odds turned hopeless? Smoke rose from Riverside in thick black columns, blotting out the dawn. Buildings stood gutted and broken, their walls pocked with plasma burns. Yet even in the ruins, the city breathed defiance. Colonel Bate Morgan strode through the rubble, her uniform torn and stained with ash. Around her, the battered remnants of the Colonial Guard regrouped. She had started with 3,000 soldiers. Barely 1,200 still stood. But every face she saw, grimy, bloodied, exhausted, was lit with the same fire. She raised her radio. "This is Colonel Morgan. Listen to me. The Zephyrians think we'll give up. They think this world will fall in days. Prove them wrong. Every street, every block, every house is a fortress. Don't yield an inch. Make them pay in blood." Her words spread across the channels, echoing in basements, in tunnels, in makeshift command posts. And the people answered, not with words but with action. In the heart of Riverside, Sergeant Danny Clark's squad prepared another ambush. They had been fighting without rest for 72 hours. Only 6 of his men remained, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed, but their hands were steady on their rifles. "Supply Depot, 5th Street," Clark whispered. "Intel says they're stockpiling ammunition there. We hit it before sunrise." Private Steve Turner, the former mechanic, checked his rifle with a grim smile. "Sir, they've got 4 times our number guarding that depot." Clark nodded. "Then we're in the right place." Before dawn, they crawled through storm drains reeking of rust and stagnant water. They emerged like ghosts inside the enemy compound. Silently, they planted explosives on crates of munitions and fuel canisters. The blast turned half the district into fire. Zephyrian soldiers stumbled through the smoke, disoriented, only to be cut down by human rifles. Clark and his men slipped back underground, vanishing into the maze of tunnels. "Beautiful work," Clark muttered as the city trembled. "Tomorrow, their comms center." Elsewhere in Riverside, Sergeant Nancy Kim and her platoon prepared for the impossible. They held the approaches to the government district, a key choke point the Zephyrians desperately needed. Her unit had started with 40 soldiers. 12 remained. Her arm was bandaged from 3 wounds, but she refused evacuation. She crouched behind a barricade of burned-out vehicles, scanning the street. "Sergeant," Corporal Bob Miller whispered, pointing. "Death Guard, a full company. Kim felt her gut tighten. The Death Guard were elite Zephyrian warriors, their black armor feared across dozens of worlds. 200 of them marched with perfect discipline. Against them stood 12 broken humans. The smart choice was retreat. Instead, Kim keyed her radio. "Colonel Morgan, this is Kim. Death Guard approaching. Request permission to engage." Morgan's voice crackled back. "Nancy, you need to fall back. Those are elites. You can't hold that line." "With respect, ma'am," Kim replied, her voice steady. "We can hold anything. We're not going anywhere." The battle began at noon. The Death Guard advanced in formation, their plasma fire tearing through the barricades. But Kim's platoon had prepared every street, every alley, every building. Snipers opened fire from windows. Booby traps exploded under armored boots. Entire walls collapsed onto enemy squads. One by one, Kim's soldiers fell. Miller held a choke point alone, firing until plasma bolts cut him down. Private Lisa Cooper detonated explosives that dropped a building on an assault team, killing herself in the process. By evening, only Kim remained, crouched behind a barricade littered with the dead. Her rifle held 3 bullets. The street was choked with corpses, half her platoon and over 100 Death Guard. The survivors of the elite unit approached cautiously. Their commander raised a white flag. "Human Sergeant," he called out. "You have fought well, but you are alone. Surrender and you will be treated with honor." Kim's hands shook, but not with fear, with rage. She rose, ignoring the dozen rifles aimed at her. "I have a counteroffer," she shouted. "You can leave now and live, or you can come get me and die." The Death Guard commander hesitated, confused. Why do you not surrender? You cannot win." Kim's face was pale, her body broken, but her voice was steel. "Because we are human, and humans do not surrender." She fired her last 3 bullets. 2 aliens fell before plasma fire tore through her chest. But even as she died, she pulled the pin on a grenade. The explosion brought down the bridge behind her, sealing the government district from enemy advance. Her sacrifice bought the defenders another day. News of the Death Guard's defeat spread like wildfire. To the Zephyrians, it was unthinkable. Their most feared warriors, humbled by a handful of humans. Morale faltered. For the first time in living memory, Zephyrian soldiers whispered of fear. In the command center, Commander Velter stared at casualty reports. His hands trembled with fury. He had lost nearly a quarter of his ground forces. "High Command will not understand this," his aide said. "They will ask why we bleed so heavily against primitives." Velter's lips curled into a snarl, but his voice cracked with something dangerously close to doubt. "They don't fight like any species I've ever seen. When we crush them, they rise again. When they should break, they sharpen. Elder Zix Moth was right." His aide dared to whisper, "Perhaps we should consider withdrawal." Velter's 3 eyes blazed. "No, if we retreat now, we lose the Empire's honor. We will not surrender to these lunatics." But deep in his gut, he knew. He was staring into the jaws of something he could not control. On the ground, Amy Phillips stitched wounds by candlelight in a makeshift hospital. Children carried water. Old men reloaded rifles. Every civilian became a soldier, every soldier a legend. Tony Reeves, his rifle across his knees, whispered to himself as he cleaned its barrel. His eyes were hollow, but his voice was steady. "They think we're beaten," he murmured. "Let them come. We'll show them what happens when humans won't yield." Outside, the night sky lit with fire as Zephyrian reinforcements dropped from orbit. The next wave had come. And humanity was waiting. 2 months had passed since the first Zephyrian ships darkened New Denver's sky. What the aliens thought would be a lightning conquest had turned into a grinding war of attrition. The cities of Riverside, Millerville, and New Spring Valley were battlefields carved into ruins. The Zephyrians controlled roughly a third of each city, but every block they held had cost them dearly. Casualty reports mounted faster than Commander Velter could read them. Worse, human resistance wasn't breaking. It was growing sharper, deadlier. In a hidden command post deep beneath Riverside, Colonel Bate Morgan studied a tactical map. Her one-sprowed guard was a shadow of itself. Less than 800 soldiers remained. Yet she smiled grimly. Those who survived had become hardened predators. General Carlos Mendades, flown in from Earth with what little reinforcements humanity could muster, leaned over the map. His eyes were red from exhaustion, but his voice was steady. "We're not fighting an army anymore," he said. We're fighting the Empire's arrogance. They refuse to admit we're beating them, so they keep sending more men into the grinder. Bait nodded, then we'll keep the grinder running. She keyed her radio. All units, new orders, we stop defending and start hunting. At dawn, Sergeant Danny Clark led his squad through storm drains to the enemy's communication hub. 8 men against 50. To most armies, impossible odds. To Clark's squad, just another day. They emerged inside the compound, silent as shadows. Turner, the mechanic, rigged explosives to the central comm tower. "Charge set," Turner whispered. "Then light it," Clark replied. The explosion shattered the morning sky. Enemy radios went dead. Human rifles barked from every angle. By the time Zephyrian reinforcements arrived, the humans had vanished underground, leaving 40 corpses and twisted wreckage. Across the city, similar raids erupted. Fuel depots destroyed, supply convoys ambushed, patrols slaughtered in alleys. The Zephyrians began to feel hunted. In Millerville, Captain Jennifer Hayes led a mixed unit of soldiers and civilians against an enemy bunker. Among them was Christine Davis, a former schoolteacher turned sniper who had 97 notches carved into her rifle. "Bunker's got 20 guards outside, 50 inside," Hayes said, her face streaked with soot. "We go fast and hard, no prisoners." Davis settled onto a rooftop, her rifle steady. She breathed slowly, sighted her target, and fired. The first guard fell, then another. By the time the humans charged the bunker, panic had already spread. Bobby Turner, a miner-turned-demolitions expert, collapsed part of the building with homemade bombs. Hayes fought her way inside, her knife slick with alien blood. When it was over, the bunker lay in ruins. The humans had taken it at the cost of only 4 lives, and they had captured crates of alien weapons. "Load everything you can carry," Hayes ordered. "Every gun we take is one less in their hands." The survivors laughed grimly. For the first time in weeks, they didn't feel like prey. On the Zephyrian flagship, Velter slammed a fist onto his console. "How many depots lost today?" he demanded. "4, Commander," his aide stammered, "and 2 bunkers." Velter's eyes narrowed. "Casualties." The aide hesitated. "Over 2,000 today." Velter's face darkened. In 2 months, he had lost nearly half his original force. What should have been a demonstration had become a humiliation. "High Command wants answers," the aide whispered. Velter turned slowly, his voice low and dangerous. "Then tell them this: humans are not fighting like any species in the galaxy. They are fighting like demons." In Riverside, Amy Phillips worked in a school converted into a field hospital. She stitched wounds until her hands shook, her face smeared with soot and blood. She had watched children carry ammunition to the front, watched miners walk into battle with explosives strapped to their chests, watched women who had never touched a gun drop elite Zephyrian soldiers with perfect shots. She looked at Tony Reeves, who leaned against a wall, reloading his rifle. His hair was singed, his uniform torn, but his eyes burned with fire. "Tony," she whispered, "do you think we can win?" He met her gaze. His voice was rough but sure. "We already are. Look at them. They came here expecting surrender. Instead, they're bleeding out for every street." Amy blinked back tears. For the first time, she believed him. Night fell. Sergeant Danny Clark's squad struck again, this time at a Zephyrian fuel convoy. Outnumbered 5 to 1, they hit fast, explosives lighting up the night. Clark's men laughed as they ran through the tunnels, the ground above shaking with the blast. "Sir," Turner panted, grinning, "when do we get reinforcements?" Clark's smile was grim. "Son, we are the reinforcements, and as long as we're breathing, New Denver still stands." Cliffhanger reveal for Part 5. Human raids cripple Zephyrian supply lines. Bunkers fall. Convoys burn. For the first time, humanity isn't just surviving, they're winning. And across the galaxy, whispers spread. The primitives of Earth are fighting the Empire to a standstill. Do you want me to roll straight into Part 6? The Relief Fleet, where Earth sends its largest fleet yet, and the war erupts into a massive space battle above New Denver. You said P6. ChatGPT said. Part 6, The Relief Fleet. The sky above New Denver burned green with plasma fire. Zephyrian ships prowled in orbit, their massive dreadnoughts blotting out the stars. From the ground, the colonists looked up and saw death waiting in the heavens. But 6 hours later, the heavens answered back. Admiral Frank Morrison stood on the bridge of the Wolverine, humanity's newest battleship. His hair was gray, his uniform crisp, his eyes like steel forged in old wars. Behind him stretched 47 ships, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, the largest human fleet ever assembled. "Sir," his navigation officer, Lieutenant Karen Phillips, reported, her voice shaking. "We're reading over 60 enemy vessels in orbit, 5 dreadnoughts, dozens of cruisers." Morrison studied the tactical screen. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, but his jaw set. "Send the signal, this is what we came for." On the surface of New Denver, word spread like wildfire. Governor Pete Sullivan addressed his people from the shattered steps of the government building. His face was streaked with ash, his voice hoarse from sleepless nights. "People of New Denver, our fleet has arrived. The Empire thought we were alone. They were wrong. Help is coming, but until it reaches us, we keep fighting, every street, every building, every breath." The crowd roared, defiance rising above the smoke and rubble. Civilians who had fought for months with kitchen knives and rifles now stood taller, their eyes alight with hope. High above, Admiral Morrison keyed his intercom. His voice echoed through every ship of the Colonial Defense Fleet. "Our brothers and sisters on New Denver have held the line for 3 months. They've shown the galaxy what it means to be human. Now we show them they're not alone. Today we fight not for conquest, not for glory, but for our people, for freedom." A chorus of voices answered through the comms, "For New Denver, for Earth." The battle began. Human destroyers surged forward, missiles streaking across the void. Zephyrian dreadnoughts replied with walls of plasma fire, green beams carving space into rivers of light. Ships exploded, scattering debris like sparks in a forge. On the Phoenix, Captain Helen Rodriguez barked orders. "Target that cruiser, all batteries fire." Missiles tore through alien shields. The cruiser's hull split apart, venting fire and bodies into space. "Direct hit," her weapons officer shouted. But a heartbeat later, plasma fire slammed into the Phoenix. The ship groaned, its hull shuddering. Rodriguez gritted her teeth. "Damage control, keep us in the fight." On the Defiant, Captain David Lee saw his ship boxed in by 3 Zephyrian vessels. The odds were hopeless. He looked at his crew, miners, farmers, ex-soldiers turned sailors. "All hands," he said, voice calm, "brace for impact. We're going to show them what humans do when cornered." He ordered ramming speed. The Defiant tore into a Zephyrian battleship, both ships exploding in a fireball that lit the system brighter than the sun. The sacrifice opened a gap in the enemy line. Human ships surged through it, striking hard. On the ground, Colonel Morgan's guard launched simultaneous attacks in every city. Guerrilla fighters struck bunkers, factories, and patrols. Explosions rippled across Riverside. Sergeant Danny Clark's squad surfaced inside a Zephyrian armory, tossing grenades into weapon racks before fleeing back into the tunnels. The explosion shook the streets above. "Another one down," Turner yelled as they escaped. Clark grinned fiercely. "Keep hitting them, every blast weakens their grip." In orbit, the tide began to turn. Captain Sarah Wilson of the light cruiser Vengeance led a squadron of destroyers against the Zephyrian rearguard. Her ships were outnumbered, but her voice was steady. "This is for New Denver," she said. "For every civilian they murdered, attack." Her ship took fire, hull rupturing, alarms screaming. But before the Vengeance exploded, her crew unleashed a final volley that crippled 3 enemy cruisers. Wilson died with her ship, but her sacrifice shattered the enemy formation. On the Zephyrian flagship, Commander Velter's hands trembled as he gripped the railing. He had dismissed humans as primitives. Now he watched his proud fleet bleed out. "Sir," his tactical officer stammered, "our casualties are catastrophic. Nearly half our ships destroyed or crippled. We can't hold." Velter's 3 eyes burned with fury and disbelief. Elder Zick's Moth's warning echoed in his mind. They are most dangerous when cornered. He clenched his jaw. "Order all ships to withdraw to the outer system. We'll regroup." "High Command ordered us to hold," his aide whispered. Velter's voice broke. "High Command has never fought humans. I have. If we stay, they'll destroy us all." But Morrison wasn't about to let them flee. "Press the attack," he ordered, his voice like thunder. "Don't let them escape. Every ship we kill today is one less threat to our people tomorrow." Human ships surged forward, hounding the retreating enemy. Missiles tore through fleeing cruisers. Plasma fire lit the dark. The running battle raged for hours, spreading across the system. By nightfall, more than half the Zephyrian fleet was gone. The survivors fled into hyperspace, limping, broken. On the surface, the Zephyrian ground army collapsed. Cut off from supply and reinforcements, they fell back in chaos. Entire regiments surrendered or were annihilated in street battles. In Riverside, Tony Reeves stood atop a ruined barricade, rifle raised high. Around him, civilians cheered as alien troops retreated into the forests. Amy Phillips leaned against the wall, exhausted but smiling through tears. "They're running," Tony whispered in disbelief. "We made them run." Amy's voice shook, but it carried pride. "No, Tony, we taught them to run." The war was over. 6 months after the first Zephyrian ships had darkened New Denver's skies, the last of their ground forces had been routed. Alien bodies lay buried in mass graves beside the human dead. Cities smoldered, but they still stood. Humanity had survived the Empire's test, and more than that, it had won. Now the battle shifted from the ruins of Riverside to the glittering halls of the Galactic Council. The chamber buzzed with nervous voices as representatives gathered. News of the siege had already swept across the galaxy. The mighty Zephyrian Empire had been bloodied by a species the Council once dismissed as primitives. At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Jake Martinez stood. He no longer wore the plain black suit he had once felt ashamed of. Now he stood in the blue uniform of the Colonial Defense Force, his voice carrying the weight of a people who had bled for survival. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice steady, "5 months ago, the Zephyrians attacked our colony of New Denver. They believed we would surrender. Instead, they found a people who would rather die than kneel." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. In the Zephyrian section, Commander Velter sat stiffly, his uniform scorched, his eyes hollow. Once the proud face of conquest, now the living symbol of failure. Jake's voice sharpened. "In 5 months of fighting, our people killed or wounded over 30,000 Zephyrian soldiers. We destroyed more than 40 of their warships. And we held against odds no strategist would call survivable. We paid dearly, 150,000 civilians and soldiers lost, but we proved one thing: humanity cannot be conquered." The Corinth rustled uneasily. The Nexus beeped in cold analysis. Even the gas beings flickered with agitation. From the observer's gallery, Dr. Kevin Walsh, the xenopsychologist who had studied the siege, rose. "I have completed my analysis," he said. Holograms lit the air, showing human soldiers in impossible last stands. "Most species surrender when losses reach 60%. At 80%, collapse is certain. But humans become more dangerous the closer they come to extinction. Their brain chemistry shifts. Desperation fuels aggression. Logically, they should break. Instead, they sharpen." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Walsh's voice lowered. "To fight humans is to face an enemy who grows strongest when most wounded." Admiral Morrison stood next, his gray hair catching the chamber's light. "Dr. Walsh is right, but his science misses one thing. We did not fight just because of instinct. We fought because New Denver was home, because our families were there, because no alien fleet, no matter how strong, had the right to take it from us." His gaze locked on Velter. The Empire thought conquest was about numbers and technology. They forgot it's also about will, and our will is stronger than their chains. General Mendades, his arm in a sling from wounds suffered in the final battle, stepped forward. "We want peace, trade, friendship. But let no one mistake us again. The next empire that tries to enslave us will face the same fate, and this time we will not show restraint." Elder Zix Moth rose slowly, his shell glowing with soft light. At once, silence fell. "I warned you all," he said quietly, but every word cut like a blade. "Humans are not like others. They do not surrender. They defy logic. They fight beyond reason. In my long life, I have seen only 3 species like them. 2 destroyed themselves in civil wars. 1 became my people's closest ally. Humanity now stands at the same crossroads." His black eyes turned on Jake Martinez. "Which path will you choose, Ambassador, to burn the galaxy in conquest or to protect it in defiance?" The chamber held its breath. Every eye turned to Jake. He raised his chin, his voice steady. "We choose to be protectors, but we will defend ourselves first. If anyone threatens our colonies again, they will face the consequences. We showed the Zephyrians what happens when you test us. We prefer not to show it again." A vote was called. For the first time in history, the decision was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, rights to defend its colonies, a voice in the future of the stars. After the session, Commander Velter limped across the floor, pride shattered but still carrying the weight of defeat. He stopped before Jake. For a long moment, the alien warrior and the human ambassador stared at one another. Finally, Velter spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I came to New Denver expecting to crush a weak species. Instead, I found warriors who fight like demons and die like heroes. I have never seen courage like yours. You have earned my respect and my fear." He handed Jake a charred Zephyrian officer's badge. "This belonged to one of my finest. He died trying to take a position held by 12 humans. Those 12 held for 6 hours against 200 of my best. Take this as proof of what you have become in our eyes." Jake accepted it solemnly. "We didn't want this war, Commander, but you forced it, and we will never be forced again." Velter's 3 eyes dimmed with something like sorrow. "No, now I see. Humans do not yield, not ever." Back on New Denver, the survivors began to rebuild. Streets filled with rubble became streets of hammers and laughter. Children carried bricks instead of bullets. Farmers planted fields in the soil scorched by plasma fire. Amy Phillips stood in the rebuilt hospital, sunlight streaming through its patched windows. Beside her, Tony Reeves leaned on his rifle, not as a soldier anymore, but as a protector watching his people rise. "They thought we'd break," Tony said quietly. Amy smiled, tired but proud. "Then they learned who we are." The wind carried the sound of children laughing in the streets, the sound of life pushing back against the shadow of war. In the silent halls of the Vorak Collective, Elder Zix Moth spoke to his people. "They would not yield," he said softly, "and because of that, the galaxy has changed forever." Far above, New Denver's star burned red against the endless dark. But now, humanity's fire burned brighter.